Chapter 25 of the City Code by adding Article 1 to prohibit discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Discussion. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor Nadi. At this late hour, I will try to be brief. I want to start with the last individual who just came up and spoke. I believe he said he was not going to appeal to religious reasons, and then he spoke about the most misquoted, misinterpreted, and misunderstood passage, I believe, in the entire Bible. From my religious rearing, I'll recite my understanding of the Sodom and Gomorrah story. A couple of angels are sent from heaven to go to Sodom and Gomorrah to visit Lot. An angry mob of rapists want to rape these two angels. Lot gives them protection in his house. The angry mob knocks on his door. Lot, out of the generosity of his heart, says, "Don't rape these two people, my guests. Rape my two daughters instead." Throws his two daughters out to the angry mob to be raped by them. The angry mob says, "No, we don't want your two daughters. We want those two men." So Lot and his family flee with the promise of God destroying all these wicked people. But God says, "Don't turn around and look at my destruction, or else I'll turn you into a pillar of salt." Sarah can't help herself. Boom, she's salt. Now Lot escapes with his two daughters, goes out to live in the mountains, knows what happens when strange people go into a foreign land. They get treated pretty harshly. Lot's daughters get him drunk, have sex with him so that they can be impregnated with his children. And the moral of the story is, don't be gay. I can't understand that. Okay, now that I've got that off my chest, I grew up in a Christian family. We attended a pretty conservative Christian church. I remember vividly when I was in, I believe, 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade. It must have been 7th. A girl had died in 8th grade. She was in a house fire. And there was a ceremony at the church recognizing her. And there were women who were members of the church and taught at the school who had been there for 25 years or more. And when they picked people to go speak in recognition of this student who had died, they passed over many of the women who were members of this church and members of this educational community in favor of letting a probably 24-year-old newly minted 7th grade teacher speak. And it was at that moment that I remember my mom saying, "We're done. We're going somewhere else." And we did. We went to a different church, a little bit more, I wouldn't say more liberal church, but it was certainly not as conservative as that church. Every week I went, every Sunday I saw I would imagine some of you are members there, the handout every day, or every Sunday. So the mission of this church is to extend the love and care of the crucified and risen Christ to all people. The love and the care. What do we mean when we say love? Because we've heard people come up here saying, "I love the sinner but hate the sin," and "I love all people." I had the very unfortunate occasion to be at a funeral mass this morning, and I heard a verse and it struck with me. It's the love is patient, love is kind. And what you hear in that verse is what's usually cut off. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when the completeness comes, what is in part disappears. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Many of the religious people here, I sympathize with you. I understand your arguments against this ordinance, but I feel like you're missing the forest for the trees, if that's the right saying. The Christ I understood from my studies, from being in kindergarten through adulthood, was a Christ that openly sought out those who were discarded and thrown away, those who were voiceless. And when people challenged him, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, it was his message was, "Why are you so attached to this doctrine? Why are you so attached to this law? Don't you understand what I'm here to do?" So the religious argument, I think you're missing the forest for the trees. If That's the what. Is that what you're supposed to say? I don't know. Whatever. You got my point, right? I want to briefly address some of the other things we heard. This is not about special rights. One of the speakers spoke pretty well on this point. This is an ordinance that would apply equally to all people. It doesn't carve out special rights for anybody. Anybody who has a sexual orientation, which would be all of us.
Can we have some consideration? We listened to you folks for 3 hours, 3.5 hours. Can you listen to us for a few minutes?
Mayor Nutty,
Be
Mayor
accomplished.
Nutty, may we have those people removed? If they continue with those outbursts, we have the officers here. Please have those people removed. No, we've listened patiently to you folks. We listen with respect. All we ask is the same. You didn't hear us outburst at some of you people, and there's some individuals that are doing all of it. So I ask you, Mayor, if in fact they continue, please remove them from the audience. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Taylor. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councilman Romano, Mayor Nadi. This is not about special rights, and just saying it over and over doesn't make it so. This is treating everyone equally based on sexual orientation. We all have a sexual orientation, whether you're straight, whether you're gay, whether you're bisexual, whatever it may be. This ordinance would protect all of us equally. It would be applied to all of us equally. The notion that this is an ordinance about special rights for special groups, if you read the ordinance, there's no mention of special groups in there. It doesn't say the Christians get this, the Muslims get that, the gays get this. It doesn't mention groups. It would be applied equally to all people, regardless of your orientation. We heard appeals to the religious person's conscience, which I'm very sympathetic to, and I understand that argument very well. But this is not anything new. This ordinance wouldn't be anything new that we haven't already done. The Christian baker cannot discriminate against a customer who comes in and lives a sinful lifestyle. Say, for example, the Jew. I know it's Christian belief that if you don't accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, you're living a sinful lifestyle. The Jew rejects Jesus as the Savior. So a Jew who comes in and says, I'd like you to bake a cake for my son's bar mitzvah, the Christian baker cannot refuse to service that person. That's a deal we make to live in this society, I believe. I don't want my son or daughter to be turned down from an ER doctor who happens to be Muslim and says, sorry, I can't give my services to your son who's been in a car accident because I'm Muslim. All of the religious speakers who came up here today, I doubt you'd very much like it if a Muslim individual came to me and said, I can't submit to a Western court. I can't submit to a court that doesn't practice Sharia law. Please allow me to be dealt with under Sharia law. We don't do that. Living in a free and open society means sometimes our beliefs come in conflict with other people's. Your right to discriminate based on your religion is not more important than the other person's right to live a life as they are, free from discrimination. And the two can coexist. The two will coexist. It's been happening for 50 years since the miscegenation laws were thrown out. It happened 100 years ago when women's suffrage was introduced. It happened 150 years ago when the slaves were freed. And it will happen once these protections are in place. People will be given equal rights, and people will have their religious freedoms. They will coexist peacefully. I want to end by saying we heard a few people say that there's no evidence of discrimination and we should just not even pass this, not even consider it. There was a psychologist who came up and said that, I quote, this being LGBT is not a healthy expression. He said there's higher incidences of depression, substance abuse, other problems. Why do you think that is? If you were subjected to second-class treatment for your entire life, if you were told your entire life you're not right, you are sinful, you are going to hell, you need to change what you're doing, you are outside of the love of Christ, how would that make you feel? Do you think you might be a little depressed? Do you think you might have it hard? Do you think you might consider suicide once or twice? he insisted, but no, the problems are not because of discrimination, but because they are discovering who they are. Could you imagine a worse insult to give to somebody? That got applause from this audience. These problems are not caused by discrimination, but because they are discovering who they are. Well, excuse me for discovering who I am. Excuse somebody else for discovering who they are. That is not a problem, and that doesn't cause someone depression. It shouldn't cause someone depression. It sounds to me like a bunch of bullies blaming the victim. I want to end there. I'm just going to make a final appeal to my colleagues on council. I believe this is a step in the right direction. There's been 20 plus states that have passed this, 30 plus states in Michigan. The United States Supreme Court has never held that these are an infringement on your religious freedoms. If they were, a test case would have gone up, and there would be law on that. It's not. It's not an infringement on religious freedom. I think it's something that it's the least we can do to help a voiceless class of people that need protection. And so I humbly appeal to my colleagues on council to pass this ordinance. I hope you will. And I thank you for your consideration. With one final caveat, there was an individual named, I believe, Patrick Viscar from Bethesda. He indicated that there might be some language he'd like to see in the section 2511, subsection A. I would be comfortable adding it if anyone is on the fence, and that would make the difference between their yes or no vote. I've got that language from the Traverse City Ordinance. I'd be comfortable adding it if anybody feels that that's the difference between a yes or a no. So again, I humbly ask for your support. I thank you very much for your consideration. Thank you, Mayor.